But
Yes.
yeah, I approached you to get you on the show because I actually quite enjoy your channel, and
Thank you.
yeah, I was wondering if maybe you, for people who hadn't heard, we'll have a link to your channel here, but maybe talk about what your channel's about and what you do over there.
Okay, yeah. So I started my channel just talking about feminism and SJWs and kind of just pointing out the holes in feminist theory. And I do some response videos and some personal videos, and it's just kind of whatever I feel like doing that week, I'll do.
Nice, nice.
That sounds
What
fun.
because you started relatively recently. What kind of made you want to do this?
Well, I actually was friends with another YouTuber. Her name is Theron Meyer, and we do somewhat similar stuff. And she had me on a stream talking to her. And after I got done with the stream, I had a bunch of messages from people telling me to make my own channel. So I kind of just gave into that, and then it kind of just took off a lot faster than I thought it would. So it was fun. It's been fun.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Did you want to jump in, Hagbar?
Yeah, it is a lot of fun, isn't it? So,
It is like I love it.
what exactly made you want to start your channel?
Well, well, I actually wanted to start one for quite a while, but I wasn't doing it because I guess there was a part of me that was like, well, what could I really say that hasn't been said a million times before? And then I kind of realized, like, oh, I can actually add, the trans perspective because that's really not out there at all. The only time you ever really hear trans people is when they're parroting, social justice stuff and feminist stuff. So I was like, well, maybe some people would be interested in hearing it. And then there's another side of me that said, well, actually, maybe they'll eat me alive because the internet isn't always receptive to trannies very much. But I was totally wrong. It's been,
Isn't that a microaggression?
yeah, it's been 99.999% amazingly positive. So,
Nice. Yeah, it's strange because that negative perception, there's almost a complete conflation now with the social justice movement and the entire trans community. It's really,
Well,
really
yeah, they,
sad.
they speak for women, gays, people of color, trans people, pretty much anyone that they can
The
use
people
as a
who say
device.
that, for the most part, are like middle class white women, but they feel the need to speak on behalf of everyone else. I don't understand.
absolutely. I've told this story on a couple of other streams before, but I'll say it again. I was in a sociology class over. I took a short little winter semester. I'm a computer science major, but I did a little mini session. Anyways, I was in this class, and a girl approached me after the class, and she is involved with the LGBT feminist group on campus. And she pulled me aside and she was like, I want to talk to you about feminism. And keep in mind, that's very much like, reminds me of like a Jehovah Witness coming to your door and trying to tell you about Jesus. Um, but she started telling me how because I'm trans, I'm a part of the feminist movement, regardless of what I think and how I feel. So you're right. That is that aspect of like they think they can talk for all of us.
Well,
And
they
I
can. They
think it
just aren't
has
always
a
right.
worse kickback. Sorry, Hagberg.
I
Go
said they
ahead.
can talk for you. They just aren't always right.
They're hardly ever right.
It does have a negative kickback because I feel like, there are trans people out there like you who don't feel that way. In fact, plenty. But there is this perception by other people who are in the anti-SJW movement that trans people are bad, trans people are this, trans people are that. Trans people are comparable to other kin, like just ridiculous bullshit.
Yeah, that was what I meant earlier by a little bit worried about the reception I would get if I started my channel. But I've come to realize, there are some people who tend to conflate that kind of stuff, but I find that once they actually hear me talk, they realize I'm not, batshit insane and I'm not really comparable to other kin. Thank God.
What do you make of transgenderism being called a mental disorder? or a mental disease.
Well, that is objectively incorrect. Transgenderism itself is not a mental disorder. Gender dysphoria, however, is a mental disorder, and gender dysphoria is something that is not exclusive to transgenderism. So you have people who aren't trans who experience dysphoria all the time. A lot of children actually do, which is why I'm not for children transitioning.
Sure.
Yeah, and so it's another common conflation that transgenderism is gender dysphoria, but it's not. So usually when people say, that being trans is a mental disorder, then I'll have the discussion, but it's a bit annoying that starting off the bat, they're just incorrect about it. And then I think, even if it was a mental disorder, what does that really what's your argument really? Because
that's the strongest argument.
You don't go around to autistic people saying you have a mental disorder. It's not productive.
Exactly. I feel the same way. It's regardless of whether it's considered on the books or off the books a mental disorder, it's not a way to take away from the arguments. That's the same as saying, yeah, well, who cares? You're in a wheelchair. Yeah, okay. What the fuck? What does that even mean? How is that a defense for your behavior? I don't understand.
Exactly.
Slaves wanting to run away from their masters was once classified as a mental disease.
To be fair, to be fair, that adds up. Where are they going to go? That's fair. They're clearly insane. They thought they were going to escape to where? I would have had to lock them back up. Come on, dude, where are you going to go? To somewhere else where you're going to be killed or abused? I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to help you.
Find that somewhere. Oh yeah, that's But no, I see that a lot because I like to speak out about trans things, trans issues, and I always get called an SJW when that happens. It's funny, but I think it's important.
That kind of sucks. Anytime you have a movement, it tends to slowly drift toward the extreme. So I do see somewhat of the anti-feminist community, MRM, whatever you want to call it, shifting towards talking about human rights at all makes you an SJW, which is shitty because I definitely don't think that trans people are as marginalized as SJWs like to have people believe, but I do think there's a place for a discussion about things we could change and things that we can make better.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about one of those things in a bit, and okay. I've made videos about trans panic, and there is some really shitty stuff. It's this mentality that because some people are complaining about problems that are bullshit, that means there aren't any problems anywhere. Anytime someone complains about something, it must be untrue.
Well, it's the boy that cried wolf on a fucking entirely on a social scale, and it's happened around. If you walk around and say everything's racist and everything's sexist, when an actual racist or sexist steps forward, nobody's going to listen. We've heard you say everybody's racist, so when an actual racist steps forward and starts doing racist things, we're just going to assume you're crying out for no reason again. We hear it over and over again, and that's unfortunate.
A really good point.
I'd argue that the social justice movement has done more to damage the relations between the transgender community and, if you will, the normies. I just watched how I feel. Yeah, I just watched a whole episode on it where, there is a panic going on in this country where they're like, oh, well, they're trying to make everyone confused about their gender. Well, some people fucking are. But guess what? It's not the people in transition. It's the assholes around them who are trying to use the difficulty they're going through to get their own power. That's
my God, that's so true. Obsessed with the way you worded that. That's so true.
Yeah, and I guess that points to more why, a bigger picture, why you oppose this feminist SJW movement, because it's directly harmful to you in a lot of ways.
It really is. I talked about this also on a couple of streams, but do you guys remember a few months back there was the trans Ager guy?
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
So here is another way in which I see, the, as we call them now, the regressive establishment really hurting trans people. This was a story of, in my opinion, a deeply disturbed person. If you read all the details about this person. And I'm not even saying that in an inflammatory way. I think it's just like you read the story and you're like, okay, this person is damaged somewhere. And this person also, there was a lot of hinting towards them possibly being like sexually attracted to children, which was really disturbing. And but this story, although I will say there were a lot of trans people who were like, oh, this story is bullshit. I can't believe this person's being called transgender. A lot of liberal outlets were posting the story, and they're posting it like it was this uplifting, amazing, triumphant story, and it was pretty. You know, people who are on the outside looking at trans people, they see that and they're like, okay, that's what they're about. Well, fuck that. And it's like, no, that's not what we're about. No.
I mean, it does speak to a bigger problem within the community that story was made like the headline event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
Did Hagbar, did you see when K-Fox interviewed that guy?
Yeah, I was in the chat for that entire thing. Fuck, Harmful Opinions was in that chat. Fucking a bunch of big names showed up to that.
Yeah, it really is.
But he has nothing to do with the transgender community. As far as anyone who's even got an iota of intelligence, they know that person's not even in transition. They're part of a sexual lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, it just adds more kindling to that fire of just dangerous rhetoric that, oh, this is what it is. When we have all these people, oh, trans age. There was that one woman who worked for the NAACP, like trans race. Like,
oh my God.
It's complete bullshit. But then the problem comes because, yeah, all the anti-SGWs look at that and say, whoa, okay, I guess transgenders must also be faking it. It can't be real. If this is all clearly bullshit, so this also must be bullshit.
Yeah, and I think what's really important to understand is that, you know, all this new shit, all this transracial, trans age, non-binary, all this shit, this is all shit that's popped up in the last couple of years with the rise of the regressives and with social justice. Transgenderism has been around, not going to say since the beginning, but for a very, very, very long time. And, you know, the face of a trans person has changed throughout time, obviously, with things like hormones and surgery and just being in a different world. But people who have changed their gender or presented as different genders, that's been around for a very long time. So it does have basis in science and neurology. So that's what I really try to drive home and make the difference. I have a video differentiating transgenderism from all these other things as well.
Yeah, I saw that one. I wanted to ask about because we might have some disagreements here, but when it comes to people who don't accept the science behind transgenderism, do you think that is bigotry, which I tend to fall more on the side that it's just pseudo-scientific, but there might be some, bigoted elements somewhere.
No, I don't think it's... that's another thing. I think people throw around that word so willy-nilly. Like,
sure.
I don't think I have been someone who's been sort of on the outskirts of... How do I word it? I've been someone who I would have been the ultimate target for people for many years if they were bigots to come out and hate on me, bash me, whatever. And I've met very few people in my life who I really could classify as like, oh, that's a bigot. In fact, I can't even think of you on the top of my head. I don't think anyone who thinks that, the science is flimsy or doesn't believe transgenderism is rooted in biology. That's not bigotry. That's just, I don't know, maybe they haven't looked into it as much, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think we'll see less of that in the coming decades.
Well, and especially if people are willing to just say "and then," and then okay, fine, no, except okay, fine. What the science isn't there? Transgender people are just making it up, and then
yeah, that's true.
You just choose to, because it's just so alluring. Just because you felt like it.
What would your solution be? Aside from a Clockwork Orange style brainwashing, what's your solution here? Do we open the camps? I'm just asking. I'd like to know what your solution is, because they never have one. So
it's kind of this mentality like people want to control how you live. Like someone could come along and say, I think LARPing is a mental disorder. It's like, who the fuck cares?
Seriously. Seriously. I think LARPing is a mental disorder. I actually would.
What? Can't we just
that's so true. Even if there was no, scientific evidence of, a transgender brain or anything like that, it's kind of like, okay, but we live in a Western society and people can do whatever the fuck they want. And that's why, even in my video where people feel like I, shit talked on people who identify as non-binary, I even said, you can have, an identity as nuanced as you want. Like, you can do whatever you want. I'm just here to, point out the differences between transgender and this.
Yeah, sure. You're in the same camp as me. I don't care if you want to be a fucking pansexual demikin or whatever. I don't give a shit. Just know I'm gonna I'm not gonna play along. But I don't care. Yeah, I just
don't like when it becomes like a chore for everyone around you. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
I find that the people who insist on really special pronouns or I don't like the controlling of other people's behavior. And I understand because there was a time very early in my transition where my mom was having a hard time using female pronouns because she raised me and I was, in her eyes, for so many years, her son. And she had a hard time with it. So I'm sympathetic towards that, that struggle of they won't use the right pronouns. But you can't walk through life expecting people to call you Z and them. It just doesn't work. You just can't do it.
Well, you can, but you could expect to be very, very disappointed.
Yeah, just don't, get hurt when they don't do it. And if you meet some people who are willing to accommodate that and they're really nice people, then that's great. But there's no way you can expect to go through life like that. And you're going to be triggered every 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And I think it's a different level for just, transgender when you won't identify. Look, people don't have to use the correct pronouns. I understand there's assholes out there. But, I don't know. I just think it's a different level, and it's just really incorrect. When we actually have scientific evidence behind this, I don't know. It's not like Z and Zen. Those aren't real things.
Yeah, and what's interesting is before my transition, I was actually in sort of a headspace that was somewhat similar to these people who identify as something in between. I wasn't sure if I was going to transition, but I also knew that I didn't want to live as a male. So I don't know about on the fence, but I just didn't know what the fuck I was doing with myself. But at the same time, I didn't say that I was third gender. I didn't say that I was Z. I didn't say that I was non-binary, whatever. I just was me. And I think that's understated these days. It's just being you. You don't have to attach yourself to all these affiliations and labels.
Yeah, I think people forget that throughout history, we actually had people who were doing the behaviors that we now have these specialized words for, and they just did it. They just did these things, and nobody said, oh, well, he's part of the transgendered community now. It was just, no, that's just what he's doing. That's what's happening. Get used to it. They're not going to change their way. That's what they're doing now. Get used to it.
That's actually so incredibly true. I was reading about
it's in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomies. It's in Deuteronomies. The saying men shouldn't dress as women and women shouldn't dress as men. They were dealing with it 2,600 years ago. It's not new and it's not going anywhere. Get used to it.
Yeah, and I was reading about the first person to have SRS, which is sexual reassignment surgery. It was a male to female, what we now call male to female. And this person had a movie made about their life, and it's a really cool movie. But there was no word for transgender back then. It wasn't the transgender surgery. It wasn't it wasn't a trans community. It was just this human being wanted this done. They went out and got this done, and they lived their life afterwards. Well, actually, she died because it was a shitty surgery. But she just did it. It wasn't like you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. That actually, I wanted to make a point kind of related to that, but I have a friend who was telling me she does medical stuff, and there's sometimes being issues with transgenders when it comes to marking the sex box when it comes to surgeries. Have you heard about that, or did you have any feelings on that?
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, they will identify. Let's say they identify as female, but they have a male body. But so
so
the
they
difference
don't tell
between
their
gender
doctor
and
they're
sex,
trans.
basically, and that's really crucial for some of these surgeries sometimes. And
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, every time I go to the doctor or, the urgent care or whatever, um, it's definitely important to always tell them that you're trans. And if, even more specifically than that, sometimes it's important to be very clear and say male to female transgender because they do know what that means. And you guys gotta list your medication. Sometimes I'll list my medication and then they'll know because they'll recognize, oh, this person's taking these usually trans-specific drugs. But yeah, I actually got an email from a man who drives an ambulance, and they picked up a female to male trans person, and this person did not tell them that they were born female and that they were biologically female to this at the point of the van. And I forget exactly what the complications were, but there were actual ramifications for this person not being completely clear. And that might have been, him specifically not telling them because he didn't want to, or maybe just didn't think about it. But it does happen, so that is important.